program is actually will be picking up, and they also have some special sections more focused in the analytic area, so requires less on-site type of internship. So so the program would be as vibrant as before. Second items that's more to do with higher education program like WPI have to run these training courses on site. They have to scale down a little bit because of social distancing, but they still are able to run some of these programs that are essential for industry. So I think those are two key areas that we have discussed a lot on. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Okay. And maybe next, Ben Benton.
Yes. So we had a pretty good discussion. We sort of focused a lot on pedagogy in terms of how you deliver curriculum online, especially for undergraduates. A couple of us were from community college, one from four-year school, one from an institute. And one of the issues we found was that, at least in Central Mass, that we had technology issues in terms of internet connectivity. And one of the solutions that Quinsigamond used for that is that we actually purchased hotspots and we would send it to students, but none of this worked unless we had follow-up with the students. So our faculty would follow up with students, our advising staff would follow up with students in order to make sure that students were connected. It may mean that we'd have to call them because they didn't have a laptop. So we would then furnish them with a laptop. So in terms of access to technology, there was an issue for us in the community college. The other thing that we talked about was how do you keep students engaged in an online Zoom, what types of pedagogy strategies that the typical traditional, I'm going to lecture for 50 minutes and people are going to listen, are probably not going to work in an online. So we talked about different strategies and flipping the classroom, or maybe having 10 or 15 minute mini lectures followed by group work or help sessions, and that might help engage students in online education. And finally, we talked about a couple of resources that are out there for teaching online for biotech, like innovatebio.org, and Millie Four Sigma has a lot of videos and tools for higher ed in terms of helping faculty teach the biotech curriculum.
Great, thank you. Fady Coleman from Boston University School of Medicine next.
Hi, yes, our group had, we had a nice discussion about things that worked and so forth in terms of keeping the students engaged, and we talked about how we can build upon that. So some of the things were focusing on more synchronous learning style, maybe meeting more regularly instead of maybe once and then just to touch base, but continuing to build that connection. It seemed to be something that students really needed, even just to keep them focused on the task at hand, which was finishing the semester out. But if you're thinking about starting a whole new semester in that way, you have to kind of get some longevity out of that. So meeting regularly was one thing, and also focusing on higher order thinking. So and that was mentioned to also help remedy the situation of higher incidence of cheating. And so if you focus on getting the students to think more critically, designing questions on assessments that favor more written explanations or analysis, that was something that you couldn't easily just Google and copy, but it also would challenge the students to use their what they have learned already in a more productive fashion. And then also trying to implement regular tips or suggestions or conversations in general within the curriculum that would help students to remember that they're still part of a community, but also also remind the instructors that they're part of a community as well. And so trying to eliminate, or rather minimize, the feeling of isolation was another topic of conversation that we felt was something that worked when we finally got it going, but definitely if you're going into it and planning for it, it could really be valuable and helpful.
All right, thank you. Cheryl Vaughn, Harvard Medical School.
Hi, everyone. We had a very eclectic group of people, two higher ed educators and a dean of community colleges. We had two people working as professional development. They do a professional development seminar at Mass College Pharmacy of Health Sciences. So while not faculty, they were in charge of learning, and that when it went online, they did find that challenging, specifically knowing how to engage with the students and making sure that the students were getting the most out of what they needed from those seminars. The transition, we talked about the transition in the spring and looking towards the fall. Everyone pretty much agreed that the transition in the spring was not as hard, especially because the labs were mostly done. So they were able to go online pretty easily. But this is, when I say pretty easily, the mode that they went online, especially those at community colleges, it wasn't high tech, it wasn't video. Mostly it was communicating with students by email. They had full-time students who had working all day long, and so they would give assignments out by email and collect them by email and reach out to students individually. So it's a really different way of thinking about online education. And then we had an interesting transition between thinking about how we give our students the technical skills and knowledge of the sciences and make sure the employers get what they want in terms of the adaptive or behavioral skills. So how do you, especially when you don't know how people are engaging with you in this online media, how do you know if they're getting this netiquette, as we heard somebody on the panel talk about, knowing how to properly communicate, how to tell a story, how to meet expectations, and how to read a situation when the online context is so different. So that was generally what we talked about.
Okay, excellent. Jess Crowley.
Hi there. So in our group, we did talk a bit about some biotech simulations. So Yakov Turner was involved in a company, Attel, in designing simulations. So we talked a little bit about that and how the importance of students being able to make mistakes in a lab simulation, which is similar to what happens in a real lab, and then troubleshooting what happens. One of the big things is to make the experience of remote learning more interactive. And I think one of the big things, especially Marshall from US Boston came up with, is that even though we are meeting with students in sort of maybe normal synchronous class sessions, it's important for the students to be able to have that social time or be able to hang out in a study group like they would if they were on campus. So to be able to provide space for students to still interact with each other in the context of a course, or even just, you know, how is this assignment going, or work together on lab analysis. And I think that's maybe one thing moving forward to make sure that not only are we getting the content of the course across, but also to get provide space for the students to really interact with each other.
Thanks. This is great. We're staying right on schedule as well. A lot to report out. Monica Hall Porter. See if we can get Monica. See who it is.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. We were really fortunate in our group to have student perspective represented, as we did have a graduate student in our group. And so one of the things that I heard other facilitators reporting back that was reflected in our student feedback is that one of the students that we did hear from basically felt much better about the transition once connection was established again, not only with her instructors, but also with other students. And so it's really important to see both sides of that coin, that, you know, the connections throughout all of this were very important. Others indicated that something that did go well is the institutional support that was provided in the transition. As far as pitfalls were concerned, it really is difficult to balance the need for content delivery as well as the professional development aspects that students gain in the courses. So the netiquette, if you will, the soft skills that companies and corporations do rely on, such as team building, that the students aren't necessarily getting. So providing platforms for that to happen is really essential. Also, the schedule changes that students and also instructors encountered, whether that be because of increased work demands for students or for those faculty members who have small children or spouses who have changing work demands. That was also a pitfall. But overall, everyone does feel confident that with planning ahead, they'll be able to adapt for what we may be presented with in the fall. So we had a robust discussion that kind of all of those points, that I made there were encapsulated in that discussion.
Thank you. Perfect. And I
You're
think
welcome.
we have two more. See if we can get in two more before time expires here. Catherine Spilios from our panel.
Hi, so this is actually wonderful. I've heard so many pieces of what we discussed in our breakout group already discussed. So one of the things that we did recognize was that obviously adaptability is key. And we also talked about the fact that no online simulation can 100% replicate the experiences of being in those four walls. And somebody just mentioned it before, you know, the missed opportunity of an experiment not working. Typically, online simulations might just progress in a prescribed manner. We also talked about the need to possibly educate students and the public, as well as potential employers, about how online learning is in fact providing specific skills on top of the additional content. And then on that piece, we heard about this from a couple different people as well. You know, the fact that critical thinking skills is a skill set that has to be taught and learned by the student. A lot of educators move forward on the assumption that their students have that skill, when in reality, there needs to be some curriculum design that explicitly teaches that skill. So I think on the higher ed side, recognizing that we can't always just focus on content and recognize the importance of soft skills on the higher ed side, as well as when those students move to the workforce.
Excellent, thank you. And just a time check, I think it's 2:55.
Yeah, I think about 2 minutes to 3. We'll just make some brief closing day remarks.
Okay.
So we have a few more minutes.
So we do have a few more minutes. Great. Got ahead of myself there. So exact. My colleague Liz Zulik from Northeastern has her hand raised.
Hi, everyone. Our small group was also, I think, had an eclectic mix of different people. We had some faculty members in higher education. We had some people who had experiences in MOOCs, some industry professionals, and a lot of our conversation was around access to technology. So thinking about the virtual simulations for labs, for example, and some institutions are in a place where they can offer that access to all of their students while others are not. And, you know, is there a way to bridge the gap that we're creating between these institutions and opportunities that we have for different learners? And there weren't necessarily solutions proposed, but just thinking about you know, how we can increase access to these types of technologies, and also to take into account, you know, are they proven really to be beneficial, or do we wait to kind of do the full court press until we have more data that supports that these types of technologies are going to be useful for students? We also loved Catherine's term of net etiquette and talked about, you know, what are the resources that are available to help educate our students on how to participate better in a remote environment, to really get everything they can out of this virtual environment that learners are now being placed in, and how a lot of this might just take time for people to really understand. Even myself, you know, muting myself during Zoom meetings and kind of starting to understand all of that, you know, how can we make sure our students get that same training when they're out there. And we also talked about different technologies that are available to different types of learners. So if you have a deaf or blind learner, for example, how can we create opportunities for them to still excel in this environment? So lots of great conversation.
Thank you. And in our last minute here, Roger Greenwell from Worcester State.
Hi, we had a very diverse group of people as well in terms of what they did, whether they taught, were co-op coordinator, an administrator. And a lot of the points too that have been brought up have already been that we discussed have already been brought up. We did talk about some other tools, including the Journal of Visualized Experiments, Labster, which was developed at MIT, turning some lab experiences into games, shifting some courses into journal clubs, using Visible Body for augmented 3D. And, I'll wrap it up with one of the points, and that was, we got to remember who we are teaching, and that's going to make us plan things differently depending on what we're doing and how we're approaching it. So I'll wrap it there.
Great. Thanks so much. This was very interactive, and thank you again to all our panelists.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Sean, and thank you to the panelists.